Does this go beyond that, and does this qualify as the sort of wiretapping that the president was tweeting about?
Well, it definitely goes beyond what happened to General Flynn. Now, of course, we don't actually know yet officially what happened to General Flynn. We just know that his name leaked out, but we don't know how it was picked up yet.
Does this suggest the president was correct in what he tweeted?
It is possible.
Judge Napolitano says even if the president, former President Barack Obama, his White House did spy on this president, there may never be a way to prove it. It doesn't mean it didn't happen. Here to explain, Fox News judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano. Judge, what do you mean he can't prove it? I thought he could prove everything. We have all the American surveillance and technology at our fingertips.
Okay, so the statutes authorize the President of the United States to order the surveillance of any person in the United States of America without suspicion, without probable cause, and without a warrant, meaning he doesn't have to go to a court to do it. So he can order the NSA, which already has the digital version of our phone calls, to transcribe the digital version into a transcript and give it to him. But if he does that, there's a record of the order.
Right.
So 3 intelligence sources have informed Fox News that President Obama went outside the chain of command. He didn't use the NSA, he didn't use the CIA, he didn't use the FBI, and he didn't use the Department of Justice. He used GCHQ. What the heck is GCHQ? That's the initials for the British spying agency. They have 24/7 access to the NSA database. So by simply having 2 people go to them saying, President Obama needs transcripts of conversations involving candidate Trump, conversations involving President-elect Trump, he's able to get it. And there's no American fingerprints on this.
So you're saying that the British used their version of the CIA to wiretap Donald Trump's phone or
well,
ours?
it's not a wiretap. The concept of plugging a wire into a phone box in the basement of a building is what the law was when these statutes were written in 1978. Everything is done electronically now via computer. The NSA has 24/7, 365 access to every mainframe computer of every telecom and every computer service provider that does business in the United States. And they share that with various intelligence agencies, including the Brits. So the British intelligence agency had this. What happened to the guy who ordered this? Resigned.
People at Trump Tower were. We don't know if this is what the president was talking about, but it certainly would seem to fit along the lines of that narrative. When the House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes came out today and said that he has been told, and it appeared to come from people who had come forward individually and not from some particular organization, that there was incidental collection of U.S. citizens who were associated with the Trump campaign. Now, what we can assume that this is, because he didn't really lay it out, is that the NSA, the FBI, or other intelligence agencies were listening in to conversations with foreigners who were allowed to be surveilled under the terms of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and that people from the Trump campaign may have been on the other end of the telephone, and then they were collected along with the intelligence from the foreign national that was being surveilled. Again, Nunes didn't lay it out for us like that, but that's probably what it was, because that's the way that the intelligence community operates. And Nunes did say that he believed that this was under the auspices of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. He said that was all legal. He also pointed out that it wasn't associated with any kind of investigation into Russia or any kind of criminal investigation. So why is this troubling? Well, Nunes pointed out that the people who were surveilled on the other end of the line, whatever it was, a telephone line or some other form of conversation, who were American citizens, were, quote, unmasked. That means that unlike the provisions of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, where the identities of American citizens are supposed to be protected and kept absolutely secret, they were unmasked. Their names were published in an intelligence product. And you'll remember that Michael Flynn's name actually was made public. So he thought that it was important enough that he just about dropped everything on the Hill, save talking to the House Speaker and the head of the CIA and the NSA, came down here in person to brief the president on it. I asked him specifically, I said, does this vindicate in any other way that, or at least give corroboration to what the president suggested happened when he tweeted out from Mar-a-Lago a few days after his address to a joint session of Congress that he was being wiretapped and in any other way surveilled. He said, possibly. Listen to what else I asked the chairman right here. Knew that there was some incidental collection because Lieutenant General Michael Flynn was caught up talking with Sergei Kislyak. Right. Does this go beyond that, and does this qualify as the sort of wiretapping that the president was tweeting?
Well, it definitely goes beyond what happened to General Flynn. Now, of course, we don't actually know yet officially what happened to General Flynn. We just know that his name leaked out, but we don't know how it was picked up yet.
Does this suggest the president was correct in what he tweeted?
It is possible.
And shortly after that, the president had what's called a pool spray as he was meeting with members of the Congressional Black Caucus. He said to some degree, Kimberly, he does feel vindicated by what Chairman Nunes told us all this afternoon. And of course, Nunes will continue to look into this.
All right, excellent. Thanks, John. We're going to take you right now to a live presser that's taking place in the Capitol with Representative Adam Schiff.
That surveillance was anything but lawful. And what people need to understand about foreign intelligence gathering and incidental collection is if we are listening to two foreign spies, for example, talking to each other on foreign soil, or two representatives of a foreign government, and they mention a U.S. person, that is incidental collection. It doesn't necessarily mean there is a call from a foreign party to a U.S. person. Even the mention of a U.S. person is incidental collection, and that name would be masked. If there is a call with a U.S. person or U.S. person identities are involved at all, those names are masked. But there are proper procedures for unmasking a name. When it is necessary for the intelligence agencies to understand the significance of the intercept, and they cannot do that when the names are masked, you can properly unmask the name. The chairman has provided no evidence that any names that were unmasked improperly. And of course, without the ability for the committee to look at the intercepts, we're not in a position to evaluate whether the procedures were followed or were not followed. Moreover, as I understand from my conversation with the chairman, most of the names in the intercepts were in fact masked. And the chairman's concern was that he could still figure out the identities of some of the parties even though the names were masked. Well, that doesn't mean that the masking was improper. And so, again, it's impossible to evaluate whether there's any there in terms of these intercepts without the committee being able to look at them. And thus far, the chair has not provided this evidence to the committee.
No, you're coming to some serious conclusions for a guy that has zero intelligence, Jim.
Yeah, you were just quoting Sean Hannity there. The House and Senate Intelligence Committees are
I also
quoting
quoted, I get you're going to cherry pick.
FBI director, you're citing Sean Hannity.
No,
and
okay.
Andrew
You also look over. You also tend to overlook all of the other sources because I know you want to cherry pick it. But but you do. But where was your concern about the New York Times reporting? You didn't seem to have a concern with that.
We have done plenty of reporting on all of this.
No, but you want to cherry pick one
commentary,
one piece of commentary.
Associates of the president to the Russians, that has all been looked at. And
no, wait. How do you know all this? How do you seem to be such an expert in this?
I'm saying that this has been looked at, Sean.
How do you know it's been looked at? Hold on. Where is? I'm sorry. I'm afraid to understand. Where can you tell me how you know that all of this is quote been looked at?
You're asking me whether
you
or not
made a
it's been
statement.
looked at.
You said quote. All of this has been looked at.
Other outlets have reported.
No. So okay. So we're supposed. So when your outlet says it's all been looked at,
the president and the Russians during the 2016 campaign, it sounds like during the context of that investigation, there might have been some intercepted communications. The House Intelligence Committee chairman did mention that, and we have reported that. Others have reported that on our air and various publications. But Sean, what you are refusing to answer, the question that you're refusing to answer is whether or not the president still believes
No, I'm not
what
refusing.
he
I just said it to Jonathan. I didn't refuse to answer that.
You have a Senate and House Intelligence Committee, both leaders from both parties on both of those panels saying that they don't see any evidence of any wiretapping. So how can the president go on and continue to
Because that's
say
not
these
because
things?
you're mischaracterizing what Chairman Nunes said. He said, quote, I think it's possible he is following up on this. So to suggest that is actually, and you're stating unequivocally that you somehow...
Literally, he said if you take the
Right, and I think that
literally,
we've already
he
cleared
is
that
wrong.
up. And he said exactly that, but the president has already said clearly when he referred to wiretapping, he was referring to surveillance. So that's...
But it sounds like, Sean, that
Okay.
you and the president are saying now, well, we don't mean wiretapping anymore
No,
because
we-
that's not true anymore.
No,
so now we're going to
no,
expand
that's
that to
not
other forms of surveillance. What's it going to be next?
No, Jim, I think that's cute, but at the end of the day, we've talked about this for 3 or 4 days. What the president had the quote wiretapping in quotes. He was referring to broad surveillance, and now you're basically going back. We talked about this several days ago. The bottom line is that the investigation by the House and the Senate has not been provided all of the information. And when it does, but where was the concern? Hold on. I just
News reports, not evidence.
no.
not
What I
conversations
think the
with
president
FBI
addressed
director.
that last night and said there's more to come. These are merely pointing out that I think there's widespread reporting that throughout the 2016 election there was surveillance that was done on a variety of people that came up.
Investigation
No,
going
how
on
do
into
you,
whether
Jim?
there were
I find
contacts
it interesting
between the
that
president's campaign
you
and the
somehow
Russians.
believe that
Of
you.
course, they're going to be looking
Okay.
at these various things.
Okay, I get it. Somehow, you seem to believe that you have all of this information. You've been read in on all of these things, which I find very interesting.
I have been read in by the FBI.
On Fox News on March 14th, Judge Napolitano made the following statement, quote, 3 intelligence sources have informed Fox News that President Obama went outside the chain of command. He didn't use the NSA, he didn't use the CIA, he didn't use the FBI, and he didn't use the Department of Justice. He used GCHQ. What is that? It's the initials for the British intelligence spying agency. So simply by having 2 people saying to them, President needs transcripts of conversations involving candidate Trump's conversations involving President-elect Trump, he's able to get it, and there's no American fingerprints on this.
I'm sure you have now seen the Senate Intelligence Committee has said they see no indications Trump Tower was the subject of surveillance. That seems to be a pretty blanket statement. What's your reaction?
Well, I think there's several things. I would also, it's interesting to me that, you know, just as a point of interest, that when one entity says one thing that claims one thing, you guys cover it ad nauseum. When Devin Nunes came out and said, I think it's very possible, yesterday, there was crickets from you guys. When Devin Nunes came out and said there was no connection that he saw to Russia, crickets. When Tom Cotton said the same, you don't want to cover the stuff. No, hold on.
No evidence
No,
of wiretapping at Trump
actually,
Tower.
this-
So now you've had the House Intelligence Committee and the Senate Intelligence
No,
Committee.
actually, here's his quote, Jonathan. No, here's the direct quote. I think it's very possible, end quote. That's what he said when he said the president's communications could have been swept up in collection. If you look at what the New York Times reported on January 12th, 2017, they said, quote, in its final days, the Obama administration has expanded the power of the National Security Agency to share globally intercepted personal communications with the government's 16 other intelligence agencies before applying privacy protections. The new rules significantly relax long-standing limits on what the NSA may do with the information gathered by its most powerful surveillance operation, which are largely unregulated by wiretapping laws. When Sarah Carter reported that by the start of the new year brought with it unexpected politicizing of the intelligence gathered in secret. Separately, the Obama administration amended a long-standing executive order allowing information intercepted through FISA warrants or by the National Security Agency to be shared by a wider audience in 16 government agencies as Obama was leaving offices. Intelligence normally reserved for just a handful of intelligence leaders was spread throughout briefings to scores of workers, and soon leaks began appearing in news media organizations, often in stories lacking context of how national security investigations are actually concluded. On March 3rd, Fox News chief anchor Bret Baier said the following, quote, there's a report in June 2016, a FISA request by the Obama administration forwarded intelligence surveillance court to monitor communications involving Donald Trump and several other campaign officials. Then they got turned down, then in October. Then they renewed it and do a startup wiretap at Trump Tower with some computer and Russian banks. Baier continues, a June FISA request that foreign intelligence surveillance courts get shot down. A judge says, hold on, Jonathan, you can ask, you can follow up. A judge says no go to monitoring Trump Tower. They go back in October. They do get a FISA granted. This is wiretap going on in a monitoring of computers that is sometimes, they believe, to Russian counts. By all accounts, they don't come up with anything in the investigation, but the investigation continues, and we don't know it. On November 11th, 2016, days after the election, Heat Street reported, quote, 2 separate sources with links to the counterintelligence community had confirmed to Heat Street that the FBI sought and was granted a FISA warrant in October, giving counter-surveillance intelligence permission to examine the activities of U.S. persons in Donald Trump's campaign with ties to Russia. The first request, which sources say named Trump, was denied back in June, but the second was drawn more narrowly and granted in October after evidence was presented of a server, possibly related to the Trump campaign and its alleged links to 2 banks, SVB Bank and Russia's Alpha Bank. Sources suggest that a FISA warrant was granted to look at the full context of related documents that concern U.S. person. 2 separate sources with links to the counterintelligence community have confirmed that the FBI sought and was granted a FISA warrant in October, giving counterintelligence permission to examine the activity of U.S. persons in Donald Trump's campaign with ties to Russia. They go on. The FISA warrant was granted in connection with the investigation of suspected activities between the server and 2 banks. However, it is thought that the intelligence community that the warrant covers any U.S. person connected to this UN investigation, and thus covers Donald Trump and at least 3 further men who have either formed part of his campaign or acted as media surrogates. On January 19th, the New York Times reported the following. American law enforcement and intelligence agencies are examining intercepted communication and financial transactions as part of a broad investigation of possible leaks between Russian officials and associates of President-elect Donald J. Trump. One official said intelligence reports based on some of the wiretapped communications have been provided to the White House. It is unclear which Russian officials under investigation or what particular conversations caught the attention of American eavesdroppers. The legal standard for opening these investigations is low. Andy McCarthy, writing in National Review, suggested, quote, from 3 reports from The Guardian, Heat Street, and the New York Times, it appears the FBI has concerns about a private server in Trump Tower that was connected to 1 or 2 Russian banks. Heat Street describes these concerns as centering on, quote, possible financial and banking offenses. This is his quote, I italicized the word offenses because it denotes crimes. Ordinarily, when crimes are suspected, there is a criminal investigation, not a national security investigation. We go on. Sarah Carter from Circa reporting, intelligence professionals tell Circa News they were concerned that some of the Russian intelligence was spread through group briefings to a much larger than usual audience back in January. Connections between the president-elect and Russians across the government. But the increasingly hard to escape conclusion that in our government that individuals in our government were instead trying to undermine the new president by saying, quote, and this is the New York Times again, at intelligence agencies there is a push to process as much raw intelligence into possible analysis to keep the report at relatively low classification levels to ensure a widespread readership across the government, and in some cases, quote, among them European allies. This allowed the upload of as much information intelligence as possible to Intellipedia, a secret wiki used by American analysis to share information. Sean Hannity went on Fox to say, quote, but protections which are known as minimization procedures have been put in place to protect Americans that are not under warrant, American citizens that are caught up in their surveillance. And, quote, by the way, their identities are protected. Their constitutional rights are protected. Now, of course, this was not the case with Lieutenant General Flynn because a transcript of his call was created and then given to intelligence officials who then leaked this information, which is a felony, to the press that printed it, end quote.
So, Sean, are you saying that despite the findings, the bipartisan findings of the Senate Intelligence Committee?
No, they're not findings. There's a statement out today. They have not begun this. As you know, yesterday or 2 days ago, the Department of Justice asked for an additional week. So the statement clearly says that at this time that they don't believe that. They have yet to go through the information. The Department of Justice, as you know, has not supplied this. But I've just read off to you. It's interesting. When the New York Times reports... Hold on.
Let's do that whole long answer.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. So are you saying that the president still stands by his allegation that President Obama ordered wiretapping or surveillance of Trump Tower, despite the fact that the Senate Intelligence Committee says they see no indication that it happened? Does the president still stand by the allegation?
First of all, he stands by it, but again, you're mischaracterizing what happened today.
No,
the Senate, I know.
Exactly from their statement.
I understand that, and at the same time, they acknowledge that they have not been in contact with the Department of Justice. So, but again, I go back to what I said at the beginning. It's interesting. Hold on. It's interesting how, at the same time, where were you coming to the defense of that same Intelligence Committee and those members when they said there was no connection to Russia? You didn't seem to report it then. There was no. So you want, hold on, you want to comment and you want to perpetuate a false narrative.
Actually, I did report that Clapper said that.
But when those individuals have gone out time and time again, when Chairman Nunes has said, number one, that there was no information that he's aware of that existed, that got 0 reporting. Number 2, when he went out yesterday and said, quote, I think it's very possible, you don't include that in the question mark. The bottom line is that the president said last night that he will be providing, that there would be additional information coming forward. There's a ton of media reports out there that indicate that something was going on during the 26th election. And I think it's interesting. Where was the questioning of the New York Times or these other outlets when that was going on?
Give me some credit.
I'll give you some.
A little intelligence, maybe. But no,
clearance.
What I'm saying is that
I wasn't done. Clearance.
Those two panels.
Maybe both.
Well, come on. Those two panels have spoken with the FBI director, and
I understand
there's
that.
no evidence of this.
Okay, I think this question's been asked and answered, Jim.
This farce and just have the president say
it's
he's
interesting
wrong.
how you jump to all of these conclusions about what they have, what they don't have, and you seem to know all the answers. But at the end of the day, there was clearly a ton of reporting. Hold on, Jim, let me answer. No, I think that there's been a vast amount of reporting, which I just detailed, about activity that was going on in the 2016 election. There's no question that there were surveillance techniques used throughout this. I think by a variety of outlets that have reported this activity concluded. So, and I think when you actually ask those two people whether or not, and as Chairman Nunes says yesterday, when you take it literally in wiretapping, the president's already been very clear that he didn't mean specifically wiretapping. He had it in quotes. So I think to fall back on that is a false premise. That's not what he said. He was very clear about that when he talked about it yesterday. Major.
Okay, Sean, so just to be clear, you're good and the president's good with stories that have anonymous sources in them.
No, it's interesting. I think it's when it comes to the Russia story and the on-the-record sources who have been briefed by the FBI continue to conclude that there's nothing there. You guys continue to fall back on these anonymous sources and perpetuate a false narrative. And yet, when it comes to us talking about all these reports in there, you then criticize anonymous sources. No, it's just interesting the sort of the double standard that exists when it comes to us citing stories, when it comes to, and then how you intend to use them.
So let me ask you what the president said last night. He was asked by Tucker Carlson, you're in charge of the various intelligence apparatus that report to you. You can
Right.
ask them. And
You
he said
can,
he was
and you would be
no,
getting in the middle.
Can I ask my
Yeah.
question? He said he was reluctant to do that. So
Right.
let me just put two things together. Earlier this week you told us when asked, has the president directed the Justice Department to collect and distribute information to the various relevant congressional committees? If I remember your answer correctly, it was no, he hadn't
That's right.
given that specific direction. Has that changed? Has he now directed
No.
the Justice Department? And is he asking himself for the intelligence agencies that report to him to provide him specific answers to these underlying questions that are separate from the reportage you're citing?
No.
Why not?
Because I think we've covered this before. I think that gets into interfering this, and I think that the appropriate process is to allow the House and the Senate to do this so that it doesn't appear as though we're interfering. I understand that. But as I mentioned to you this the other day, Major, if we go ask them, then you're going to...
The reports that I was able to see did not have anything to do with Russia or the Russia investigation. I think some of it seems to be inappropriate. What I've read seems to me to be some level of surveillance activity, perhaps legal, but I don't know that it's right, and I don't know that the American people would be comfortable with what I've read. But let us get all the reports.
The president was correct in what he tweeted?
It is possible. I think the president is concerned, and he should be. I think he'd like to see these reports.
Good morning, or everyone. As promised, I'm going to continue to keep you apprised of new developments. Some significant developments, I think, occurred over the course of the last few days with information that was brought to my attention. And I'm going to just sort of read a very brief statement, and that's about all I can tell you, but I want to keep you fully informed of what's happening. At our open hearing on Monday, I encouraged anyone who has information about relative topics, including surveillance on President-elect Trump or his transition team, to come forward and speak to the House Intelligence Committee. I also said that while there was not a physical wiretap of Trump Tower, I was concerned that other surveillance activities were used against President Trump and his associates. So first, I recently confirmed that on numerous occasions, the intelligence community incidentally collected information about U.S. citizens involved in the Trump transition. Details about U.S. persons associated with the incoming administration, details with little or no apparent foreign intelligence value, were widely disseminated in intelligence community reporting. Third, I have confirmed that additional names of Trump transition team members were unmasked. And fourth and finally, I want to be clear, none of this surveillance was related to Russia or the investigation of Russian activities or of the Trump team. The House Intelligence Committee will thoroughly investigate surveillance and its subsequent dissemination to determine a few things here that I want to read off. Who was aware of it? Why it was not disclosed to Congress? who requested and authorized the additional unmasking, whether anyone directed the intelligence community to focus on Trump associates, and whether any laws, regulations, or procedures were violated. I've asked the directors of FBI, NSA, and CIA to expeditiously comply with my March 15th letter that you all received a couple weeks ago, and to provide a full account of these surveillance activities. I informed Speaker Ryan this morning of this new information, and I will be going to the White House this afternoon to share what I know with the President and his team.